Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, our region's longest-running public affairs program. Lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota are joining us today for a recap of the week's activities at the state capitol. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to the Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, Tony Sertich. Our show this week was recorded on Friday. Lawmakers are maintaining a busy schedule with the mandated end of the session approaching quickly on May 18th. It's been an unusual situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, and all of us are learning to do things in new ways. Joining us this week is Senator Jason Rarick, a Republican from Pine City, representing Senate District 11. Welcome back, Senator.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and Representative Nathan Nelson is joining us again too. He is a Republican from Hinckley. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Representative, first off, this week was quite unusual where we saw an additional budget forecast to get a sense of how revenues and spending are projected. Normally they come in November and February, but there was a new one because of the COVID-19 pandemic to give a better sense of potential spending revenue. And we saw that we went as a state from a projected over $2 billion surplus to an over $1 billion deficit. So wondering your reaction to getting that budget forecast and how you think that'll shape out for the rest of the legislative session.
Well, thank you. And yeah, it was getting a forecast. I think it's something somewhat expected that we were going to have a lower forecast. And that's, exactly what it is. It's a forecast, and we saw almost a $3 billion difference, and I think everyone was expecting something, and I think there were probably some estimates coming in higher, some lower. But looking at that and seeing that there's the deficit or expected deficit now, there's going to have to be some changes in our budget looking forward. And so now we're down to a week left and some change. How do we work with this? What do we do going forward? And in the meantime, we still have a pandemic going on. And so how do we manage around that, give the help and the funding to the families and small businesses in our communities that are needed, and working forward. So that'll be some pretty tough decisions and discussions that are going to be happening in the next few days.
Senator, your take on the budget forecast and its impact on the end of session here?
Yeah, we knew something like this was coming. We weren't quite sure what the numbers were going to be, even just a week ago. We were looking forward to getting these numbers because, there were still some things we were hoping to be able to try to get through and have some things to spend some money on. And I think now we all see that surplus is gone, and we really have to change our minds about some of the things that we were hoping to do. And I think we need to start looking at, following what Wisconsin has already talked about and starting to look at where can we make cuts, because we're not done with this, and the potential is to go even further behind if we don't find a way to come out of this and get the economy, the sectors that are shut down right now, get them going again. We're going to have some major cuts. So this has been a real help to help let us see, about where we are. And I believe we're supposed to get a even bigger picture one come in August to help us understand just what we're going to be facing next year.
Sure. And we do know there's some federal funds that are coming as well that can be plugged in on some of these aspects of your budget. I know that in the Senate, you passed a round 4 economic COVID recovery bill and also a tax bill. And in the House, there was a bill that was passed this week as well that had different components to it. One was a little heavier on tax cuts in the Senate, and in the House, broadband funding, some funding for PCAs. Both had an economic development component to it as well. Representative, do you want to talk a bit about what was in the bill, your thoughts on the bill, and if you disagreed with some of it, some of the solutions you'd like to see in the last week of session here?
Yeah, the couple of the things that were in the bill, there was kind of 4 main areas. One was some funding for PCAs. Another one was broadband. And it was kind of primarily, with the broadband, primarily focused towards education, making sure that the distance learning that's going on, that can be funded. The help for small businesses, and I'm drawing a blank on what the fourth provision was there, but it was payday loans, and kind of it's really predatory lending that was happening there. And it was something that there was a lot of things I agreed with on it. Unfortunately, I voted against the bill because there were things that I didn't think it really covered adequately. And for PCAs, yes, it increased their pay, but that ended with when the emergency is over. So it was temporary. And I think, they do a great service for it's an act of love that they're, in a lot of ways, they're doing, and let's be able to fund them better. And lifting the cap on the hours, it was a temporary lift on the cap, and I think we could do longer and better. And I think if it had been a very close vote, my vote would have been a yes. But this is something that it did pass through the House, and I'm glad it did. At the same time, I think we could have worked better to make it a better bill.
Great, and we're talking PCAs, and in acronym world of the legislature, personal care attendance is
Yep.
What we're talking about there. Senator, the bill that passed the floor, and these are bills that will need to be negotiated. These two bills, like I said, some more economic development dollars, and then an additional bill for some tax cuts and tax relief. And so could you comment a bit on your position on those bills and what you'd like to see ultimately at the end of the session here?
Yeah, we passed a tax bill last week, and, we had two primary goals this year in the tax bill, and that would have been to eliminate all income tax on Social Security income and to get the full 179 conformity with the federal tax code. We knew right away we just couldn't get to the Social Security exemption. The price tag that goes with that is just too high, knowing what we're facing now. And we really want to get that conformity with Section 179 to help out our farmers and small businesses when they make investments in equipment. Now we're going to have to really think about that and work with the House on it to see if we can fit that in, because there might not be any spending available. I'm hopeful. There was also a piece in there for debt equalization for school districts that was going to really help some of our property poor school districts that struggle to get the funding they need from the state. And again, it was something that was high on our priority list. Unfortunately, we might have to let it go now because of the new projections, but it's definitely something we want to keep looking at. And really, if there is a way to do it, that's still our priorities and what we want to get done. But we'll have to work with the House, and there might be a number of COVID things that just suddenly become a higher priority right now.
Great. Representative, do you have a sense here we have a little bit of week and change left of the legislative session? Do you think there's enough time to get this response done, or do you foresee potentially a special session being needed, considering that this budget forecast came so late in the game and how remote that you all have had to work in these last few months?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of things that are happening here in the next week and change, but I do kind of anticipate that because of this is ongoing, the pandemic, I do expect that we are going to be meeting in a special session. I think the governor's probably, as my guess, is going to extend his the peacetime emergency, which I've been thinking, just kind of hearing that June 12th will probably be called back in. So I think in that time, there probably will be some more bills crafted that will be put together to take up issues as they come along. But I do believe that in the next week, we are going to see a tremendous amount of activity to trying to guess at what's going to be the next steps that we're going to have to take as a legislature. So knowing that, I do think that we're going to, because we don't have a crystal ball, we can't see the future, but we can kind of plan as best we can. I think we're going to be probably off and on in a special session, probably much of the summer, just to try to mitigate any issues that are coming up.
Senator, likelihood of maybe this legislation we've been talking about getting done in the next week, or the needs for a special session?
We've been discussing that, and I know the Senate, we've been instructed as of Monday, be at the Capitol, be ready to be there on a moment's notice, just like a normal end of session would be. So there's going to be, we're negotiating in different ways. Instead of everybody in one big room talking about it, we're doing a lot of these Zoom meetings and phone calling, and it makes it a little more difficult and it slows things down a bit. I think the biggest issue we're going to have that really might drive us to that special session to get things done is for our staff to get everything put together. We can come to an agreement, but then it takes time for the nonpartisan staff to put it into what it needs to be and get the bills drafted and the way they fit into state statute. And that could be what really slows us down the most and causes, a special session to deal with things. Even if we come to agreements before May 18th, it's that the busy work of getting everything into place and the way it needs to be just takes so much more time right now. And we maybe have not been able to give them enough time to get that done. But I do believe we'll all be there and the agreements will be reached by what we can do by May 18th.
Great. Well, one of the other major pieces of legislation, generally in the second year of a biennium, is the capital investment or bonding bill, where the state borrows dollars at a reduced interest rate to invest in capital projects across the state of Minnesota that has statewide or regional significance. And so now here we sit with a week or so left. Chances of a capital investment bonding bill, size of a bill, what you guys would like to see in their representative. Can you give a prognostication on the chances for a capital investment bill in this week and the type of bill maybe you'd like to see?
I'm hearing just a little rumbling that there's going to be a bonding bill in the House that is going to come to the floor. I'm kind of hearing a number of around $2 billion right now. And I think looking at our economy, the bonding market, all of that, I think that probably is wishful thinking that we're going to go that high. I think it's important to do bonding. There's a lot of projects that I think need to be done that we're looking at. However, borrowing $2 billion during a budget deficit or a forecasted deficit, I think that's being rather aggressive. And while the interest rate is low, I'm also kind of concerned of the bonding market. That's kind of a long-term investment, and I'm not sure that the investors are actively buying municipal bonds. So that could be a challenge to be able to come over those things in this. But I would like to see maybe closer to a $750 million or maybe $1 billion bonding bill. So there's going to be some priorities that need to be addressed and where we go from there.
And certainly the discussion about the size of the bill is always one that goes back and forth. The other piece that many folks talk about are the number of potentially jobs created in the trades. Senator, coming from a trades background, what are your thoughts about the bonding bill size? What should be prioritized and likelihood of passage?
Yeah, this is something I've been in the last couple of weeks been going back and forth on. And back when session started, I was telling people let's be a little careful with how big we let this go. Construction was booming and bids were coming in high. And even though interest rates were low, I was thinking, wow, it's going to be too costly right now. It might not be the best year to go big. Then when this happened and I started talking to a lot of construction folks, and private industry really started reeling back on what they were going to do, and they were seeing their schedules open up a lot. And I started thinking, wow, we could go bigger than I was originally thinking, and it could be an investment that keeps construction moving. And now with this budget forecast, I have to scale that back a little bit again, because we can't go too far into debt, because we're encumbering our budgets in the future when we do that, and not knowing what we're going to find out in August and next November, what the real deep impacts are going to be, I think we need to go back to being a little bit more careful right now. So we're probably going to see something coming out of the Senate just under $1 billion, and it's going to be heavily focused on roads and water infrastructure, and doing restoration projects on existing buildings, at our universities and our colleges and such. So I think those are the things we really have to focus on, saying, hey, let's keep our assets in good shape, but we can't be looking at building new things right now, and that's going to be a tough sell. So I think that's what we should be focusing on, and we can always if we keep it a little smaller and the economy comes back better, we can do a little addition to it next year if needed.
Great. So let's talk about the governor's peacetime emergency executive orders. We've certainly seen in the last week or so here, the dial, as Governor Walz has talked about, has been turned forward a bit to provide for more curbside work for many of the small businesses across the state of Minnesota. Also for healthcare, elective surgeries and others are looking to be opened up. But we're also seeing some big challenges around our nursing home and assisted living facilities, and the governor announcing a plan to attack those challenges where we're seeing hotspots. These emergency orders were more of a bipartisan support early on in the session, and as the days and weeks went on, we definitely saw some more partisanship and some different viewpoints about the governor's executive orders and the pace of this. Let's start with you, Representative. Can you talk a bit about that? The governor's executive order is looking to expire here on the 18th. We don't know as of this taping how he will choose to either extend or modify or finish up with that. What would you like to see moving forward in this area?
I think first I have great appreciation for what the governor has had to do through this pandemic. He's made some tough choices, and I think it's been just a calming and reassuring voice through the start of this and where we've been heading, and it's been brought a lot of confidence to the people of Minnesota for just how he's handled it, and it's something that I've got to give him a lot of credit, because he's been a voice of calmness and reassuring, and then a coach and the teacher has come out in him during this time. And I think everybody feels that there was an importance to the emergency orders or the peacetime emergency, and being able to declare that and giving him the authority to do the things that he has done with the executive orders. And at the same time, I think with the executive orders, there's a lot of legislative business that is happening within them. And I think, the partisanship has been showing up in the last several weeks. It was kind of interesting at the Capitol the first 2 weeks of March. When I was first started hearing about, the COVID-19 increasing and, what the possibilities were, there was a little bit of kind of joking and skepticism, but I think it was about March 11th. I think it was a Wednesday, if I got my date correct, but that just disappeared, the partisanship. And now it wasn't the ideas on either side that was kind of the enemy, if you will. It was everybody was focused on COVID-19 and how do we handle this as a state. And the partisanship disappeared, and we focused on the immediate need. And I'm thankful for that, because that's what needed to be focused on. And now that the emergency of the issue is kind of over, I think that we need to be moving on past that and saying, I don't know how long we're going to be fighting COVID-19. However, all elected officials need to be having a voice in this and kind of restoring the balance of power. We've got three co-equal branches of the government, and let's go back to that. Let's have the legislators do the legislative authority, the judicial branch do the judicial, and the executive do the executive. And let's move forward with that and have a plan on how we're going to open up the state safely, and also have all of the elected officials be a voice in this. And I think that's something that our communities are kind of wanting and expecting. At the same time, it's we appreciate the work that the governor has been doing, and the calmness and the reassuring voice that he has been through this time. So I don't know. I kind of anticipate that he will extend his emergency powers, but I would really appreciate the opportunity to be able to work as a legislature and him as a governor going forward.
Senator.
Yeah, thank you. And, I agree that right away at first, we needed to move quickly. We didn't know what we were facing. And I think like when you look at and went around and talking to people, everyone was in agreement that the governor was taking steps that maybe everyone didn't agree, but we didn't have much information. We knew he had more information than the rest of us. And so we were following his lead, and he did a great job. And we needed to respond to things sometimes within hours. And, there's not enough time to bring the legislature into that when you're having to move that quickly. I think we're beyond that stage where we need to move that fast. And it is, we hear from all the legislators that we are being inundated with constituent concerns and, help that they need. And people really look to their senators and their state representatives to reach out when they need help, more than they do the governor's office, because it's a little closer contact. And I think people are looking to have that brought back to say, we can take a couple of days to respond to things, and we can have our voices heard and input heard better if the legislature is going to be included, and the two bodies have to pass something and send that to the governor. So, I think what's happened here in March and April has been handled well. But I think moving forward, I hope we can change that and bring the whole legislature back into the picture and move forward the way it's supposed to be.
Last topic here will be agriculture. For many of the viewers, Duluth North, it's not the biggest sector of our economy, but both of you in the districts you serve and representative, your livelihood, you know quite a bit more about this. And for the people further up north, we all eat. And so the food piece is very important to all of us. Representative, from being on the ground, just you and your daily life, but then some of the people you serve, can you talk about how COVID-19 has impacted our agriculture economy in Minnesota?
Well, thank you. And agriculture is something that people do it because they love it, and it's something that yesterday my 4-year-old son was with me. We're planting and getting seeding the next crop down, and preparing for the winter ahead of what do we feed our animals or what do we market for grain. And as we're doing that, I think there's a lot of optimism in many parts of agriculture. I've got beef cattle and my cows are calving right now. And so it's a time of seeing something new and looking forward. At the same time, we're looking at, the harvest end of this, for the swine industry and cattle. The processing has been really hurt by plant closures and the just the challenges that they're having with COVID-19. And so, some of this has now switched to taking some of our animals to local processors. And unfortunately, they can do about 1% of the livestock that we have in our country. And so they're an important part. At the same time, 1% of processing capacity is just far too small when we're looking at a country of 320 million or 340 million people, however many we have in the U.S. Whether we're talking processing of livestock or of the fruits and vegetables we're hearing of, unfortunately, being left in the field and plowed down in California and Florida and things like that. And so it's a real challenge. And a lot of our food goes through the retail side of not necessarily just the grocery stores, but through our restaurants. And with that being hampered, our packaging is different. And so everything needs to be able to change within the middle, from between the farm and the table. All of that has had to change. And how long is this going to take place? Can we retool our packaging and our processing to be able to handle this? our employees, how do we keep them safe and healthy in our processing? And so that's some of the big concerns that we have in moving forward, is making sure that we can do this in safe and making sure that our country has the food that we need to have. And security of food is something that's very important.
We let the farmer go first. We only have 30 seconds left. Senator, any other comments on our ag sector of our economy?
Well, I think Nathan kind of spelled it out pretty well. The ag sector is just one that's getting hit right away. Our salon owners, bar restaurants, they're the first sectors being hit. I think everybody needs to start preparing. When we saw the deficit numbers, it's coming for everyone. It's maybe not going to be as quickly, but there are going to be cutbacks that we all have to make. And, we all have to tighten our belts a little bit, and we have to look at ways to, like I said, maybe reach out to a farmer and buy a pig from them if they can't get it to market. It's not really going to help them a lot, but everything we can do will be better. And we have to look at the way we do things, the way we process, and maybe start to change some of that going forward to prevent something like this in the future.
Great. And on that note, we are out of time. And I'd like to thank State Senator Jason Rarick and Representative Nathan Nelson for being with us this week. This is our
Thanks so
final
much for
legislative
having us.
report. Yep. And this will be our final legislative report of the session, but we'll be back next year as we talk with lawmakers from northern Minnesota about the issues at the state capitol in St. Paul. Thanks for joining us this season. For the team at WDSC, I'm Tony Sertich. It's been my pleasure to be with you. Take care.